Trump evokes strong reactions across the board. A torrent of emotion pours in not only from social media, but also from the pages of what were once considered serious publications, assuming such a category still exists. Curiously and tellingly, several outlets continue to refer to Trump as the former president of the USA, as if unaware that in American protocol, all living presidents retain the title President for life, even long after leaving the White House. At present, it is nearly impossible to find thoughtful commentary on the first steps of the new U.S. president. There are simply too many vested interests involved. Assessing Trump's actions, therefore, requires recognizing him as a player in a complex, high-stakes game, one that demands an understanding of nuance and detail. Unfortunately, that kind of analytical approach has all but vanished, replaced by blind allegiance to political allies and ideological dogma. Even those making honest attempts to unpack the situation often fall short. Trump comes from the business world, and any business person aiming to survive has to take in the entire landscape and be prepared to act outside of rigid ideological lines when needed. In that regard, Trump appears consistent with his background. To understand his decisions, one must start by grasping his logic, a logic that stands in stark contrast to the long-entrenched worldview of the bureaucratic class on both sides of the Atlantic. For at least 2 generations, the dominant mindset among Western officials has been one of bureaucratic feudalism. This entrenched class views the state as personal property, aims to guard it from outsiders and dissenting voices, and treats access to public resources as a rent extraction mechanism. Meanwhile, the appetite of the bureaucracy continues to grow. The rent stream is shrinking as a result of inept public administration, since merit-based selection has long been replaced with the promotion of insiders and loyalists. This decline is compensated thanks to the sophistication of global financial markets through 3 main mechanisms: monetary emission, expansion of public debt, and increased tax pressure on everyone, but especially on the rich, that is, those who are uniquely positioned to drive economic growth and, by extension, sustain the very rent the bureaucracy thrives on. In such a system, those in power are primarily motivated by preserving control over financial flows and justifying ever larger shares of government revenue, privileges, and influence being funneled into their own hands. 2 mechanisms evolved to help maintain that power. First, securing broad popular support through re-election strategies. Second, building an extensive network of power-adjacent structures, institutional safe zones to fall back on during political off-seasons. Popular support is maintained through a host of populist tactics, vote buying, expanding the voter base, and policies designed to appear benevolent. The examples are well known: subsidized housing in affluent areas, expansive welfare programs, performative support for minority groups, mass legalization of undocumented immigrants, and more. Meanwhile, these fallback institutions have become so bloated that they now place enormous strain on public budgets. A typical Western bureaucrat, after leaving office, effortlessly lands in a think tank, regulatory agency, state-affiliated foundation, nonprofit, oversight board, a cozy university post, or as a diversity, equity, inclusion director in a major corporation. This sprawling ecosystem of often redundant or unproductive entities survives by draining taxpayer dollars for questionable projects. To justify their existence and budgetary needs, they dream up the most outlandish initiatives, from rescuing fish from drowning to teaching skiing in Madagascar. The bulk of the money goes not to causes, but to themselves: inflated staff rosters, lavish offices, fleets of cars and jets, generous salaries, and performance bonuses. It's not uncommon for part of the funding allocated to those hypothetical drowning fish to quietly cycle back to their supposed saviors as if there actually existed some imaginary international agency for aquatic safety. Otherwise, the fish see nothing. Funds go to those who know how to kick back a portion to the original distributors. These agencies especially love murky waters, places with internal hierarchies and a king fish to broker the deals. Send them money for any noble goal, and they'll reward you handsomely in return, with both cash and perks. Just remember, the most luxurious resort in Gaza was reserved for UN agency staff. And frankly, no one seems to care where the money ends up, whether it funds narcotics, weapons, or underground tunnels. Want a specific example? Let's not even look at notoriously opaque outfits like USAID or the many shadowy foundations known for financing terrorism or propping up petty dictators. For the sake of fairness, let's take something that's supposed to be harmless, even beneficial. Take the British NHS, for instance. As a footnote to this particular example, it's worth noting that the UK government recently made a bold move, dissolving NHS England and transferring its functions to the Department of Health and Social Care. Whether this marks a long overdue reckoning or just another reshuffle of titles remains to be seen. Still, one can only hope that the people of Britain, who've funded this Leviathan for decades, will finally see some tangible benefit from the change. The NHS was the United Kingdom's public health care system, consuming 11.3% of the entire national budget. It's a system perpetually short of billions, where over 10 million surgeries annually fail to meet prescribed timelines, where it's impossible to get a chest X-ray for suspected pneumonia in a timely manner, and where colonoscopies are neither offered with anesthesia nor conducted preventively after age 50, despite global medical standards. With over 100,000 doctor vacancies, qualifying for a medical exam slot requires weeks of nightly effort, and it's often easier to book one in Mumbai than in Manchester. This now defunct system had been managed by 215 separate NHS trusts and 42 so-called integrated boards. The latter alone employed over 25,000 administrative staff. For context, the UK has roughly 140,000 doctors. The number of clerks within the trusts wasn't published, but judging by NHS proportions, we can make an educated guess. Out of approximately 1.4 million NHS employees, only 140,000 were physicians and 377,000 were nurses. Now let's look at efficiency, specifically at the GP, general practitioner system. A GP is a non-hospital doctor working from a modest office, typically equipped with just a stethoscope and an ear flashlight. Under NHS budgeting, a 10-minute GP visit is billed at 56. Based on this rate, the system receives from the national budget approximately £600,000 per year for each full-time GP, 40 hours a week, 4.5 weeks a month. Even assuming a lighter workload, say 2/3 of full capacity, it still costs about £400,000 per year. Yet GP gross salaries range between £40,000 and £70,000. NHS overheads even in such low-tech outpatient care, and let's be clear, this isn't hospital-based medicine with costly equipment and complex staffing, eat up 80% to 90% of the cost. In other words, from £600,000 in taxpayer money, about £70,000 goes to the doctor, another £63,000 to overhead. And the fate of the remaining £467,000 is anyone's guess. Again, this was a system consuming 11.3% of the UK's national budget. A system billions short every year. A system in which 10 million surgeries miss deadlines, where pneumonia cases don't get chest X-rays, colonoscopies aren't done with anesthesia or preventively post-50, and where 100,000 doctor positions remain unfilled while candidates hunt for exam slots more easily in India than in Britain. Until recently, the NHS was headed by Amanda Pritchard, who has never been a doctor, nurse, manager, or financial specialist. She holds an undergraduate degree in history and has spent most of her adult life in politics and public sector finance. As early as 2005, she joined Tony Blair's mid-level political team, a move up from her position as a clerk within an NHS trust. Over the course of her rise to the top of the NHS and its £100 billion budget, she led various trusts and spent years heading the NHS Improvement Agency, a parallel bureaucracy staffed with officials tirelessly working to improve the NHS. During her time there, NHS staffing ballooned by 20% in a decade. Service quality deteriorated significantly, and the budget grew by nearly 40%. Whether these achievements helped or hindered her ascent, Pritchard led the NHS from 2021 until its recent dissolution, seemingly unfazed by power shifts or changes in government. Well, as was not hard to guess, the head of the NHS will get a very nice payout for leaving office. Notably, she succeeded Lord Stevens, a career Labour bureaucrat. Appointed as NHS CEO in 2014, under the banner of grand reforms, Lord Stevens steered the NHS straight into the 2020 disaster. For his efforts, he was rewarded twice, first with a peerage from the Queen in 2020, and second with a soft landing in 2021. That retirement placed him directly into 3 high-profile roles: head of the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency, chair of the Cancer Research Foundation, and board member at King's College London. He also now sits in the House of Lords. Analyze any of these agencies, systems, or foundations, and you'll find a recurring theme. They are fallback pads and taxpayer-funded launch pads for bureaucrats, machines for grinding national budgets into personal gain. They are designed to escalate costs while steadily lowering the quality of publicly funded services, ensuring there is always justification for even larger budgets in the name of improvement. That's why no conventional leader, regardless of party affiliation, will dismantle this apparatus. The system works for them too. No one, except Trump. Not because Trump is uniquely virtuous, brilliant, or heroic, but because, unlike the others, he doesn't need to profit off the system or secure a bureaucratic parachute. He already has money, and his power is enormous, but it's also time-limited. And what he wants now is one thing: legacy. The legacy of the man who will make America great again, whatever that may mean. And with that in mind, for better or worse, that's how he'll make decisions. He may do things that are visionary or reckless, but he is not beholden to the interests of the bureaucratic caste. What does Trump believe it takes to MAGA? He's been very clear. In his view, America's core problems are wasteful government spending, a dangerously soft posture toward military and trade partners, crushing overregulation that serves only bureaucratic interests, and a tax system that stifles growth and initiative. His actions can be analyzed directly through this lens. Above, we've addressed why public spending is so inefficient. In the following videos, I'll touch on the remaining 3 pillars. For now, perhaps the more immediate question is, what do I think of Trump's approach to government spending? Honestly, I have mixed feelings. On the one hand, the current system is far easier to break and rebuild than to repair. And in that regard, I fully support freezing programs and initiating external audits of all agencies, foundations, and commissions. The emphasis on external, not ones conducted by the bureaucrats themselves. Musk is exactly the kind of figure who fits this role. On the other hand, the fallout from such freezes will inevitably hit millions of recipients, and not all of them are corrupt officials, payroll parasites, or tribal chieftains. Many are genuinely deserving of help. But we have to acknowledge 2 things. First, Trump sees the world in sharp contrast: America on one side and everyone else on the other. Anything outside U.S. interests is irrelevant or even adversarial by default. It's a fundamental shift away from the feel-good but deceitful globalist rhetoric about helping everyone, everywhere. Second, while in a perfect world we might instantly sort the worthy from the unworthy, that's not how reality works. The system has metastasized like a malignant tumor, And the treatment, call it fiscal chemotherapy, is going to be painful, but it's necessary. That said, I fully understand that success is far from guaranteed for two key reasons. First, modern Western bureaucracies will not surrender the system they've built, a system of dominance and privilege, without a fight. They remain the most powerful, adaptable, and aggressive force in the West. They can obstruct or delay progress, simulate compliance, retaliate through litigation, or hide behind self-serving legal frameworks they themselves created. They shape public opinion and, if needed, will resort to the dirtiest methods. No surprise there. What's at stake is the structure of governance itself and the real power and prosperity of an entire class. Second, even if Trump and his team manage to tear it all down, who's to say they can build something better in its place? Will it be reform or just a new facade over the same old system? And even if they do offer a visionary, meritocratic alternative, how much of it can they realistically implement in 4 years? Who will come after Trump? What will motivate the next administration? Wouldn't it be easier for them to simply ride the system than challenge it? There are no clear answers, no matter how hard we look. Spoiler: in future videos, I'll dig deeper into other Trump initiatives, from tariffs and immigration to regulation and taxes. And the conclusion will likely remain the same. We don't know how this ends. What we do know is this: Trump is making a genuinely astonishing attempt to transform the United States from a stagnant bureaucratic feeding trough into a great nation. And by great, I don't mean a utopia or even a place I'd necessarily want to live. Trump has his own cynical vision of greatness, and that's something we'll talk about in the next videos.